Ladies and gentlemen, coming at you from Midgar and the edge of creation, we bring you today's episode, begging the question, did Final Fantasy VII Remake live up to the hype? But before we dive into that, there are some very generous people, who need to be thanked. And that is the Sages of the Lodge, being Alex Bamal, David Fries, Shane Driscoll, Chris Perkowski, Corey Barchat, Scott Castellano, Andrew Parker, Nick Taborski, Charlotte Astry, Kevin McBride, Michael Fay, Richard Arnold, Dan Muller, Andrew Clay, and the family. Thank you very, 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 very much for all you do for the Lodge.
I know some of those people.
You do know some of those people.
I do know some. Those sound familiar, some of those names.
Yeah, exactly. Let's, I think we should actually give a little shout out to the Mosey gang. So, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you today's guest, Chris Birding from the Midgar Minute. Now, Chris,
hey, everybody.
For those who may not know, please let them know what the Midgar Minute is.
Oh, well, I'll gladly do that, Nick. Well, the Midgar Minute is a Final Fantasy VII, general Final Fantasy VII podcast. We've obviously been talking about the remake, but we've also done episodes on like the soundtrack, Advent Children. We plan on doing more stuff on compilation material in the future. So, if you enjoy Final Fantasy VII or anything therein, come give us a listen. For sure.
And you can find us on Spotify, all the podcast platforms, the Midgar Minute, all the ones, whichever is your favorite flavor. And while we're at it, let's give a shout out to the Mosey gang. Those are the ones who donate to the Midgar Minute and keep us rolling. Don't know how many of you will make it over here, but if you do happen to be here, like Scott, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, like Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So look, there's a lot to talk about with this game. Obviously, you and I have already logged about 30 hours of discussion about this game.
Yeah, so. Like we've already talked about it at length, but us discussing whether or not it lived up to the hype, I would just, short answer, yes, it did. Absolutely.
Well, let's see if we could build in, I'm not sure everyone understands the weight of that hype, because this was like, you know how there are a lot of games people want remade now that have been out for a long time. And they're like, oh, what if they remade this? It's like
me included.
Exactly. It took maybe 2 years for people to go, oh, they should remake Final Fantasy VII. Like, I feel like once Final Fantasy X dropped on the PS2 and people saw those 3D renders and graphics, immediately people's heads went to, so when are they going to remake Final Fantasy VII? Yeah,
that and voice acting as well.
Yes.
I feel like the introduction of voice acting to Final Fantasy games are, they've been in games, I guess, up before that, but, for Final Fantasy games specifically, I feel like that was another oh yeah, that'd be cool. I want to know what these characters sound like. Outside of Advent Children, I guess would have been the only way that we've seen that before.
Yeah, but that didn't happen until I think 2006 that movie came out.
That was even okay. Yeah, that was way after the fact.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check on that now.
I think I want to say it was
2005. It dropped in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it on a UMD on a PSP. That's all I remember. That's a nice little time capsule.
This is also something Square Enix has been pretty open about that they were always going to do. I'm sure, we're old enough to remember when they dropped that 2003, not 2003, that PlayStation 3.
PlayStation 3, yeah.
They did the opening shot and they rendered it in PS3 graphics. And so everyone was like, oh, so we're doing this.
They're hitting the button. They're breaking the glass. I always imagined it as they literally had a thing mounted on the wall that said, in case of emergency, break glass, and behind the glass is just a sheet of paper that says Final Fantasy VII Remake on it.
Everybody signed off on it.
Yeah. It's like, hey guys, if we start getting into too many, 13s, we'll remake.
We'll remake 7. Just to remind everyone we're still out here.
In case of stagnation.
Exactly. But look, this was a really highly anticipated game that spanned almost 2 decades of people waiting. you know what I'm saying, close to
multiple generations of
multiple
fans.
gens, console generations. Like, this is just something that was always anticipated, and it finally fell on our lap. And I think there are two things that are important to remember when judging whether or not it lived up to the hype. One, this is just an appetizer for the main course. That is important to remember.
And for people who, I mean, I'm assuming if you have listened, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you probably have played the game. I'm assuming,
or at least are aware of it.
So this is like this. So Final Fantasy VII Remake is not the entire game remade in this one go, and you know, certain things happen that, you know, that was probably for the best. You know, that was probably that we needed a little bit of break between, you know, between these parts in order to actually kind of fully wrap our heads around certain things
and to fully flesh them out too, right? Like to flesh them out further to build more depth. And I think the second thing that's worth noting in the context of whether or not it lived up to the hype is that, you know, I'll go out just like you just did and say, I do believe it lived up to the hype. But that's That's here today, October 24th, 2020. At the end of the day, the legacy of this game, at least this first installment, will be dictated by its sequels.
Oh yeah. We could look back on this, you know, 2 years from now and be like, man, we were so stupid for believing that they had any idea what they were doing, you know? But exactly. I think judging from what I've seen from this game and how much love and care has been put into every little tiny detail, I'm way more like my hopes are high, and my, you know, I'm keeping my expectations like in check, but I think judging, they're not fucking this up, you know. And even when people are saying, oh, why does Final Fantasy 16 look like trash compared to Final Fantasy 7 Remake, I'm like, that they're betting all their chips on FF7 Remake, and I think it's going to pay off. I hope it does.
I think it will too. I think, you know, you have to remember why we all wanted this remake. We wanted to see, at least for me, right? I wanted to see these characters interact in a more human way. I wanted to see the emotion fleshed out as opposed to me having to read a visual novel. And look, have
the characters sit there, you know, motionless, ergo, you know, moving their block arms up and down.
Exactly.
You know?
And look, let's make something very clear. When we compare, you know, the technological differences between games, we are not insulting the original. I don't know about you. It's one of my top 10 favorite games of all time. I love and adore it, and nothing will take that experience away from me.
It still holds up too. Like, I mean, obviously, you know, it's dated when you go back and play it, as obviously dated, but I could still go back and be like, oh yeah, you know, maybe, and I don't know if that's nostalgia or whatever, but I can go back and be like, I appreciate this still.
Exactly.
And even, you know, the remake changes some things around and does some things, and it doesn't take away from, you know, the other stuff in either the original or in Crisis Core. It's still, those games are still going to be enjoyable to me.
Yeah,
I'm still going to find value in that, you know?
Nothing about Remake invalidates the original or the compilation material.
No. Unless you're stupid. Like, I'm just straight. No, I'm kidding. But no, like, because I've seen people that are like, you know, it's not even just with this, but things in, you know, if anything gets remade, it's like, oh, or a sequel comes out or something, and it's like, oh, it ruins everything. You know, it ruins the entirety of the thing for me. And it's like, well, I don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, I can still enjoy something, even if there's one part of it that I don't like, you know? But
yeah, and actually, that's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think one of the things that I loved the most about this, and if you don't think this was my original opinion, you could go tune into the Midgar Minute. I think it's like episode 3. I wanted this to be its own thing, because the like, it's like, my experience with the original and compilation material is its own standalone experience that, again, nothing can compromise. I love the fact that 7 Remake isn't just, hey, let's put a fresh coat of paint on the same thing that happened in the original. They said, no, a lot is going to stay the same, but we're going to deviate and be our own thing.
And boy, did they do that.
And boy, did they do that. And to me, that's great because I feel like that actually makes the original stronger. You know what I mean? Because think about it.
Makes you want to go back.
It makes you want to go back.
It again.
It remains its own unique experience. If you kept the storyline and everything the exact same way, well, then you would just play 7 Remake for the rest of your life. You would never go back and play OG. But the way they're building out 7 Remake, I'll be able to play however many titles this spans across, I'll be able to play all of these, then go back and play the originals, and in a way had 2 unique experiences that don't invalidate each other in any way.
No, and I think honestly, hopefully, what I'm hoping is that they're going to complement each other in a way that's like, you know, something where you could go look at the original and be like, oh, this is, you know, where they got inspiration for this, or, you know, things deviated here, and like if things end up going in a way where they seriously deviate, then it's like, oh, you can go back and be like, oh, this is the one timeline or whatever, this is the other timeline or whatever, you know. It's like,
however they choose to deviate from it.
There's so much potential there. I mean, obviously there's a lot of potential for it to get a little too, you know, fantastical and weird, but I don't know. Like I said, I think
I'm not worried about that because
they know how serious it is. Like, you know, people will, you know, make jokes about Kingdom Hearts and stuff like that, and how that franchise got a little too wacky and out there, but it was already out there and wacky to begin with.
And I think what a lot of people underestimate is that Kingdom Hearts its wackiness is inspired by the wackiness from the original. That's why the FF7 characters are in Kingdom Hearts in the first place, is the wacky, because like I feel like some people don't give credit for how wacky the original actually got. Between Cloud's visions and like Sephiroth morphing to Tifa at certain points, and like spanning between different existences and flowing through the live stream. Like the original got wacky as fuck.
And but everyone just remembers, you know, polygons
the grounded stuff
on the screen.
They just remember the grounded stuff, you know?
Yeah, they don't remember all the weird and wacky stuff.
All the really weird shit.
Really, it's just I feel confident just because they know, like, this is the core of Square Enix, you know, for
real,
for better or worse. I feel like it's, you know, it's the game that kind of really put them on the map, at least in terms of, you know, the Western,
at least in the West
world.
Yeah, but look, I want to get into so here we are, we're saying it lived up to the hype. It's time for us to start talking about why. What about this remake was the most special to you? Like, what did they do right by that hit you the best?
That's a good question, actually, because there are a lot of things that.
The short answer is a lot, but what for you stands above the rest?
Honestly, the thing that really got me was the performances by the cast.
Absolutely,
and, you know, the voice actors. All of them did a fantastic job. There's not a single bad voice actor in this game, which is a crazy thing to say, but is definitely, at least in my case, it's true. Just the way that they're able to deliver all these emotional moments and non-emotional moments. Like, there's a lot of comedy in this game that that everyone does very well. You know, I think that was really for me, because, you know, obviously, you know, there's like the combat, which is also a great, huge upgrade that it was like the best handling.
A company-wide upgrade,
game.
I think.
Yes, because I think moving forward, I think that's what things are going to be, you know, judging by FF16, where they're literally hiring Devil May Cry combat designers to come and do their combat, which I think is great. I think
that's amazing.
You know, people are like, oh, it's not turn-based. Like, I mean, turn-based is fine. I just think that nowadays, I think action RPGs are more, it's more visceral. It's more, you know, direct. It's
more engaging.
Right. And it's like, even like going back and playing the original FF7, it's like, you know, using the ATB system, it's not the greatest.
Well,
you know,
let me punch in real quick. That's one of the things I think that makes the 7 Remake combat so unique, is that it is action RPG combat with like turn-based sprinkled in.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yes,
mean? Where you're
they're
giving
able
commands to your
they
outside fighters. Well,
mhm.
it's so
When you
clever.
can, yeah, and it's really, and it's super satisfying as well, because you can get, um you could set things up between all your other party members, and you could like set up these crazy combos, and I'm like, there's something here, because like when
Oh
you
yeah.
think of like FF15, it's like they were kind of going down this road a little bit
They just didn't
with,
figure it out yet. They
yeah,
just,
it was just like they were just starting to go down that, like, all right, let's maybe go a little bit more towards action. And then with 7 Remake, they went a little bit further, and now I think with FF16, they're probably going to be going, and probably from there forward is going to be way more focused on that kind of stuff, which I think is great.
I really think we're better off that way. I
Yeah.
really do. It's not to say that there isn't a place for turn-based in this world. There obviously
No,
is.
absolutely not.
But I think when you look at what Square Enix is doing right combat-wise, let's
Mhm.
just say I think the combat for 7 Remake and Kingdom Hearts 3 is better than Dragon Quest 11. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think there's more to those combat systems than that. I think there's nothing wrong with change.
I mean,
And
honestly, I think it ultimately comes down to personal preference. Because
yeah,
I know people that are like, they really like the, Xenoblades kind of like, oh,
or
you just
Fire
go over here,
Emblems.
you go over here, and like, your character just does stuff, and you don't really put in anything except for, specific skills or something. Like the MMO approach of like, you just
Yes.
like you hit a button and they just do the thing, right? You're not sitting there mashing a button or putting in inputs,
Yeah.
putting quarter circles in.
And I guess
Um,
I don't want to invalidate anybody who prefers
mm,
turn-based systems, but when you think about the legacy of Square Enix, and this builds into the original FF7,
we've
they've always
had,
had a reputation for being at
30
the
plus
forefront.
years.
What's up?
I was gonna say there's gonna be 30 plus years of turn-based
Yeah.
games. I think we could maybe give
Give some action
action.
RPG a try. But I guess
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is Square Enix has built the reputation of being at the forefront of JRPGs. Their games
Mm,
setting the standard. And look,
I
it's
mean,
not to say you can't build a great combat system that's turn-based, but when you
mm,
look at what's going to push video game combat forward, it's definitely more along the lines of the action RPG styles you're seeing in your Final Fantasy VII remakes, in your Devil May Cry 5s. That's the kind of
mm,
stuff that's going to
in
push
your
the genre forward.
Bloodborns. I mean, honestly, I think maybe I feel like, people are, especially like in an action genre. I mean, with Devil May Cry 5 coming out, like definitely kind of swayed things a little bit. But I feel like for a long time, it was everyone was all about the Dark Souls and the Bloodborne and like that
Yeah.
style of combat. And like that's, it's fine for those games. And it's like very slow and deliberate. And I enjoy that. But when you're playing a fucking an anime, lack of a better term, anime game, you want to be up there. You want to be up doing crazy, jumping all over the place.
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't want to, you don't want something to be, you know, I mean, I guess depending on maybe certain characters or something, maybe, but I think it's fun. Like playing as Tifa in a remake is super fun because she flies all over the place and does all
Yeah.
this crazy stuff, and like that is just super fun to me.
And I was just going to say, I think one of the beauties, and I hope they keep doing this. I hope this is
Mhm.
something they remember that they did right in the first installment that they keep doing in later installments. Dude,
Mhm.
the best part of this is cycling between fighters is the push of a button, and
Mhm.
every fighter makes you feel like you're playing a different game. Cloud
Yep.
feels like a hack and slash. Barrett feels like a shooter. Tifa feels like a beat 'em up. And then you got Aerith, who's like a long distance mage. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's like every single fighter is its
They're
own.
super distinct and very, you know,
There's
but
not a lot of overlap.
yeah, and they all mesh together very well too. Like
Yes.
they all, there are certain fights in that game where it's like, oh, this just feels great. Like there's a great synergy between all the
Yes.
people. And then, like I was saying before, like when you can start lining stuff up, one after another with each character, it makes it super fun,
It makes it
and
really fun. It keeps it fresh.
it makes me hopeful for the future when we get, people like Red and Yuffie and Vincent and all these other weird characters that we'll get later on, like having them incorporated in, and I'm interested to see.
And I think what they have going, I was gonna say, I think what they have going for themselves is like Red 13 is obviously gonna fight very unique to everyone else. He's a lab rat dog, you know, so he's gonna feel very different. Yuffie is a ninja. There's a lot you could do with that. Thing is, Vincent is where there might have some overlap. They have to do a pretty like diligent job to make him feel different than Cloud.
They could just make Vincent Dante. That's kind of what he is. Or make him Nero from, you know what I mean? It's like
I wouldn't mind. I really wouldn't mind. I think that'd be fine.
I'd be cool with that. I mean, well, Vincent, I mean, he just has like the gun, right? And he could do some stuff.
You could do some.
He's got a sword too, you know. I feel like by the time we get to Vincent, I feel like
I think we'll be all right.
There'll be a thing, or we get a Dirge of Cerberus remake, and that's how they handle it. And they're just like, oh well, okay, that'd be weird. But
I want to go more into the characters because I do believe like I'll go out on a limb and say I think the combat is the strongest thing about this game. I don't think that invalidates the rest of it. But when I think about what makes my heart happy, it's these character interactions and the way they fleshed out these characters. I think this is the best incarnation we've seen of Cloud, a character I feel like they struggled to really find a good voice for. Yeah, for a long time. And I feel like they finally really nailed this character in a way they hadn't before. But I want to ask you, who is your favorite character from 7 Remake? Who was your most enjoyable character?
That is a really tough question.
It's a loaded question.
It's a really tough. I mean, my heart says Barrett, but my heart also says Tifa as well. But then also Aerith is great. Like it's really hard. It's really hard, dude, to pick like one, because the arcs that all these characters go on is so intriguing and compelling, and that you could feel like all the little nuances in their characters, you know, in their voices from just these little tiny things that you could pick up. It's, but I mean, I gotta go with Barrett, man. I have to. I can't like.
Well, uncover it. Pull the curtain back. Why Barrett?
Because he is like, I feel like he is like he's a little bit of everything, and you know he's you know serious, he's wacky, goofy, over the top, and I feel like he has kind of like the biggest arc, I think. Overall,
he got the most. I think his arc got actually very subtly got the most focus in 7 Remake.
Yeah, and I feel like he got you know, he just everything about him. Like there's nothing really negative to say about any of these characters, but him in particular. You know, maybe next to, I mean, Cloud goes through. He has an arc, but I feel like Barrett's is a lot more wide, you know what I mean? It's like,
well, with Cloud there's a lot of context we're missing, right? There's you know, but with Barrett is very like on his sleeve, hard on his sleeve kind of guy. We know what's going on with him, we know what's in his head, we know what matters to him. Like,
he's probably the only straightforward character actually in the entire story, because
that's a good point.
Think about it. You have Cloud, who is obviously keeping things from us, Tifa, who's clearly also keeping things from us, Aerith, who is definitely most assuredly keeping things from us, and you know, I mean, Red kind of just shows up at the end, so he doesn't really count. But you know,
well, he hasn't even told us his name yet, so he's keeping shit from us too.
Right, and all he does is just say jokes, and that's all he does. In terms of the first Remake game, that's all Red does, is he just tells jokes.
Pretty much. Well, because you find out later that he's a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has this deep voice and he's so distinguished. You think he's like this old, wise creature, but he's like, I think he's 14 years old? He's like a teenager.
Yeah, I think something. Yeah, in the original. Yeah, I wonder if they're going to change that.
I hope not. I hope Bugenhagen's still his dad. I hope that's still dad. But
yeah, I don't see them. I don't see a reason for them to change it, I guess. But
yeah, well, Aerith calls him a child. Like she does say, this child is a friend. So maybe she has a way of recognizing, hey, he's a kid.
Aerith, I feel like towards the end of Remake, man, Aerith it be like she's a different person. I feel like she literally she's like, oh,
she takes the mask off.
I know what I have to be now, and so I will be this like ethereal, like very, oh, I'm gonna speak in all these like really like vague platitudes and be like, yes, the future is yet unwritten, and saying all these like
future's
weird.
always a blank page.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say,
sure.
When after my first playthrough, I think like Barrett was definitely my favorite after my first playthrough, because one thing I will say, cards on my table face up. The one scene in this game that made me cry was sort of the goodbye scene between him and Marlene. Like, it's not very often I'll tear up at a video game, but like that really did get me.
And like Marlene, I don't know if they hired like some Pixar people or something, but
for real,
they like Marlene is like the cutest fucking thing.
Oh, she's adorable.
Like, man, and it's just one of those things. Like, I'm always a sucker for, since Barrett's obviously like, a single dad, kind of like, lone wolf and the cub type of thing. Even though it's not that exact. Yeah, it's not the exact same situation, but it's like why I like The Mandalorian so much.
Yeah, exactly. The same motif.
Protecting a little kid, and Barrett's out doing his righteous crusade or whatever. I think, So I think, Barrett will. Yeah, Barrett's definitely my favorite in this one now. But as much as I love everyone else,
I will say after future playthroughs, I have to pick Aerith, because she's the most interesting.
She's playing the long game.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, doing multiple playthroughs, Aerith becomes more and more fun to watch, because when you see what happens at the end,
you get all those little nuances and those little,
little nuggets of information. Whereas like with Barrett, and this is to the character's credit, by the way, there's kind of none of that. Exactly who Barrett is on the first playthrough.
Yeah. what he's about pretty much right from the get-go. Yeah.
But Aerith kind of builds some more stuff in. And I think Brianna White is the voice actress. She nailed this character in a way nobody in any of these incarnations, be it Advent Children or Kingdom Hearts, was able to before.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, man. Because she has a YouTube channel, by the way. Strange Rebel Gaming, I believe it's called.
Good plug, solid plug.
Solid plug. I don't know. She just like she has like this like heavenly aura around
can I tell you
her.
What I think it is?
What?
I think every time someone's voiced Aerith, they only took the direction of the whole, like the holy woman, quote unquote. Whereas she was able to personify that, but she also captured Aerith's silly side, her childish side, her carefree,
the snarky,
the
playful, the snarky side. Yeah.
Where everyone else who's taken on that role kind of doesn't have that.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
I'm Aerith.
Yeah, exactly.
I sell flowers.
Yeah,
down by the church.
Whereas she was more fun. She made the character very fun to be around.
Way more fun. Yeah, and then, and when the gears shifted, she could also hold that up as well.
Exactly, and it felt more real because it's a very obvious, deliberate, and noticeable change with Aerith in the end game. Once we get to her room in Shinra, she takes a very obvious turn and starts to kind of open up about what's going on. And it makes me wonder, how open is she going to be from here on out?
Because it feels like, obviously, depending on, we've discussed some theories on the Midgar Minute before. But I think it's probably going to be what, on a need to know basis. That's what I would assume, because I don't think she's just going to flat out, like, unless shit gets really bad or something crazy happens, she's not going to just be like, all right, guys, this is the deal. I'm going to get stabbed one day, so I got to tell you all these things. I got to, we should, maybe we should, discuss some sort of plan. But I think, depending on which direction they go in, honestly, I think that she's probably going to play it close to the chest.
I think
unless one of the characters is straight up like, "Hey, Aerith, what the fuck?"
Probably going to be Tifa. Probably going to be Tifa, by the way, because Tifa's already kind of had enough. She's like, "What are you not telling us?" She said that like 3 times in the remake. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I hope Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Tifa. You know, obviously, she's a great character. I feel like we're not gonna see until we go back to Nibelheim. We're not gonna see her like fully, because I feel like this entire game it was just like her struggling over with one thing, and that's like being, you know, serious about, I guess, fighting against Shinra.
She's stuck in between everything. She's stuck in between fighting Shinra. She's stuck in between telling Cloud everything. She's stuck, like, she's just. And I think Andrea Rodea, small detail, small line, brings this up when he meets her in the gym. He's like, "Oh, you're very fit, but your muscles look very tight. You're obviously very conflicted." You know, it's just like she's just stuck in between two different worlds.
She's denying her true strength by being so indecisive. Yeah, and it's like it's kind of a shame because Tifa's like a really good character in the in the original. Like she has a great arc that she goes through, and it kind of is, you know, unfortunate that at least in this part is that she really doesn't really get a lot of play. You know, like
she's one of the characters that grew the least. Like I think of the main four, Tifa probably had the least amount of growth, but that's because a lot of her stuff is connected to Nibelheim.
Yeah, it's like,
and that's really where her arc takes off.
Yeah, and it's like we see little bits and pieces throughout the game, but it's never, you know, it's never explicitly talked about, you know. And I love how it's one of those things where they're just kind of like dangling it over, and it's like, oh, yeah, well, the Nibelheim incidents, yeah.
Well, I'll say this is when I kind of knew A, they were going to do things a little different, and B, that I was all in, is when in chapter 3, when Tifa stops Cloud from killing Johnny, and then she just says, "Cloud, you're scaring me," and I'm like, good.
One of the best line, not only one of the best lines, but one of the best line reads in the game.
For real.
Like it literally sent like a shiver down my spine. I'm like, oh.
Me too, because like you and I, we know where this is going.
It's like, and also I don't want to make Tifa upset.
Yeah, nobody does, man. Nobody wants to make Tifa upset.
At the heart of it all, I didn't want to make Tifa upset. Okay.
So, you know, we've talked about this at great length on the podcast, but let's where do you want to see Final Fantasy VII Remake improve?
Well, I mean, really, I'm trying. I'm trying to think because I know I've said before.
Let's get the hot take out of the way and say aerial combat. We all know that one.
Well, yeah, there are definitely some fixes to the combat that need to be made. I don't. Aside from that, I mean, as long as they give me more of what they've already given me, I'm good to go. Really, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of stuff that needs to be improved.
Here's what I'll say, because I'm not sure, and you let me know what you think. I'm not sure if I'm projecting this or not, but this is kind of what I hope they're going for. So obviously, this first game was very linear. You know what I'm saying? It was a very linear.
You want it to be a little bit more open, right?
Yeah, and I think that was the point, right? Because, you know, the crux of this game, we're glued to fate. We're stuck. We're stuck in the, you know, the arbiters of fate keep us in one flow. We're stuck in one. We're boxed in, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I kind of like that the game felt that way. That because we were locked into fate, the game was very linear and we were kind of stuck. I think it would make this plot point a million times stronger if now that we've severed ourselves off from fate, the world is now open. You know, you don't feel, because there's a lot of times where the games say, like a great example of this is when you're on the rooftops with Aerith. You can't run. You're stuck walking. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
there are moments like that.
Very much a guided experience, yeah.
Yeah, the game kind of glues you. I want none of that in the next game. Because I feel like that's how a gameplay mechanic can help tell the story. Is in that first game, you're tied to fate, so the game almost gives you this guided experience, whereas in the next game, it's like, hey, now that you've severed that off, Gaia
now
is yours.
We can, right. I mean, I could totally see that. I could see them, especially, you know, maybe that makes a little bit more sense of them why the first game was exclusively in Midgar.
Yes.
And now moving forward, and eventually, you know, in the original, there's an open world that opens up, you when you get the airship and stuff like that. But yeah, I could see them, because they kind of, at the end of Remake, there's kind of, when you have full like free reign to go over all of Midgar that you're able to explore, it feels like maybe they were burgeoning on something like that, of like in the next game that there's going to be like hub worlds, and then you'll go in between the hub worlds, and you can fast travel and whatever. Maybe when we get the airship and stuff, then that'll be like, maybe it's like full open worlds.
Blown, yeah.
We've reached peak open worlds. And maybe that'll be like, in the third part, or however I'm assuming that this game is going to be split up into 3 parts.
That's what my gut's telling me. I think it's 4 at most.
Yeah, because anything more, because like I could see them doing 3 main, and then maybe doing some like sub games or like DLC or something.
If they Crisis Core remake, shit like that.
Right. Like, which I feel like they could totally do and get away with it. And I mean, I would, if I could get a Crisis Core with this new engine and with the new combat.
Yes.
Even though, people, maybe they keep the, what's it called? The DMW system with like the roulette stuff spinning in the original Crisis Core, which I love the hell out of that. Even though it was like kind of just partially just random.
Yeah.
I still love that. It was like weird and unique for like that was back when they were still trying to like come up with new ways to do like active combat a little bit, I guess. And, I think that was a pretty interesting system that they had. And I would love to see that come back in some way.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I hope it's in many ways the future of Square Enix. I think the combat system they developed here in 7 Remake, this is the best gameplay mechanic they've done in ages, man. Like 15 would have hit different if this was the combat we had.
Oh, dude, if you could do like, if you have like slow down and, you do all the
command prompts stuff. Instead of just having cinematics with Prompto and Gladio and Ignis, actually switching to Prompto, Gladius, and Ignis. Gladio,
yeah. Excuse me. Gladius.
Reading it like a textbook white guy.
Gladiolus.
Gladios.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, FF15, man, that was a real bummer. I mean, now I'm sure if you picked it up now, I'm sure it's a fantastic. I mean, it's still a all right game.
It was a good game. I enjoyed it.
The ability to switch between everybody, which you could not do up until all the DLC for those characters came out.
Yep.
Which was like a year or so after the game came out, which is like kind of crazy. But, I think moving forward, I'm really curious to see what FF16's combat like really is going to be like, because I feel like depending on how that is, I think it's going to inform how Remake Part 2's combat will feel like.
I think it'll bear some influence, yeah.
Because I feel like this has been a progression. If you look at, like we were saying before, like from 15 to 7 Remake Part 1 and I guess 16 and then whatever, even though technically they're made by 2 different teams, I feel like...
Yeah, but they definitely borrow from each other.
Yeah, I feel like, they might just be like, hey, we'll pay you twice if you want to help us with the Remake Part 2's combat as well. So I'd be more than interested to see that moving forward.
Me too. Because again, I can't say it enough. Like, they're really on to something here. If they can keep building on top of this system they built, we could have combat beyond our imagination. Like I couldn't imagine. This is some of the things I think is cool. Is like, go back to 1997 when this game first came out. You couldn't imagine that a combat system like this would ever exist.
No. That's before, like, what were action games at that point? Like
Legend of Zelda
Crash
was
Bandicoot?
probably the best you had. Crash Bandicoot, Ocarina of
Legend
Time.
of Zelda, yeah. I mean, and it's like, I mean, maybe you could think of like, oh, maybe there's like a Zelda game that is a Final Fantasy game, but at the same time, it's like, it wasn't until I think it's just the limitations. Now that we have like virtually no limitations in terms of technology and stuff,
at least compared to 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I think I mean, there's definitely more room to grow, but I think with everything that we have now currently, we can make the best possible version, I think, of FF7 Remake, whatever that we could now that we ever could before.
And I think that's what we're doing here. There's one criticism about, not one, but like, here's a criticism some people had about the story that I could level with. Is there was this particular scene that was taken out that was a very profound and powerful scene in the original. And that's when you're captured by Shinra and you follow the trail of blood and you find the president was like killed in cold blood by Sephiroth. And that's when you're like, fuck, this Sephiroth guy's a real bad motherfucker. And, you know, that's a scene that's not in the remake. And a lot of people were upset about that. And here's the thing. I get it. But do you know what scene I actually prefer? And maybe I'll get some slack for this. Barrett's showdown with the president, because I think that did so much for Barrett's character. Like, I keep coming back to this, but it's like, you know, the line where the president is like, that's all you want, your name's to be cleared, and then he starts going on that rant about like, well, how are you going to handle when there's a natural disaster? Who's going to take care of the people? Well, the people you're trying to rescue, will they thank you for the world you've given them without Shinra? Like, and it's just like, you know, obviously, you don't agree with President.
It's a philosophy battle, you know?
Yes.
I love that.
Exactly.
I would love that way more
than
him getting like stabbed off screen or something.
Exactly. You know? And I think we needed to learn about President Shinra because I think that's going to build into Rufus. You know what I'm saying? Because we saw who the president was, and he's really just like a sociopath who wants something and he gets it. Very narrow-minded. I think Rufus is the same way. To the point that Rufus does not give two shits that his father is dead. So it's like, I think this not only builds context.
He's probably happy. He's probably even happier now.
Thrilled.
He's dead. He's like, oh, I get all the power now? Okay, cool.
Dude, he was smiling when he came off the copter, you know? So I think it's scenes like that. It's like, yeah, we gave up this scene, but in return, we have scenes like this. And that's not the only one. There's a bunch of scenes that build more context into people's character. You know, just like we brought up before, the cloud, you're scaring me. It's like, yeah, I mean, a couple scenes were lost, but we gained a lot more in terms of that kind of shit.
Say, here's the thing is that, you know, considering that they're breaking this up into parts, they had to make some concessions. Like with Sephiroth, at this point in the original, we don't know really who Sephiroth is. We've heard about him. We haven't really seen him. But, you know, obviously now everyone knows who Sephiroth is, like in the real world, right? Yeah. And it's like we need to start setting him up from the get-go. He needs to be
established.
Because he's the big bad. And it's like you can't subtly bring him up and then wait 2 years or whatever, however long it is till the next part to be like, who is that random guy that like I saw a flash of once? It's like, no, we need to establish, much like how they took some liberties with Hojo as well in this game, where
which
like
I loved.
You don't learn about Hojo shit in the original till like way later on in the game, and then right from the get-go they're like, oh no, he's like a crazy evil motherfucker who wants to do some crazy shit.
Well, dude, you know, we brought this up on our last episode. Just, you know, another example of a scene that we gained that builds so much more into these characters. That scene with Aerith when she's in the capsule, and then there's Hojo who's bringing up her dead mother. Like, would you like to see her through the lens of one of my microscopes? And as beautiful in death as in life, like, it just all of that. All of that.
And another thing too, I think that in the next part we might not see Hojo. We might not see Sephiroth. You know, we might not see Sephiroth until we see him, or we'll probably go back to the Nibelheim incident and all that stuff. We'll see him there.
Yeah.
But he won't be as active in the story, I feel like, because the way that you kind of last see him in the Edge of Creation or whatever, but you know, in terms of the actual story, the last time you see him, he's, you know, falling off a Shinra Tower. And it gives that feeling of like, I'm not going to see you for a while. Okay.
I think what we'll see is I agree with you. I don't think the physical Sephiroth we're going to see in the next game. Yeah. I think what we're going to see him in is flashbacks. I think we're going to see him in is those cloud moments of clarity.
His cloud, his you know, his psychic or his panic attacks.
Which is funny because I think that's actually going to, I think it's almost going to like pull the reverse effect where like in the first one, you know, you saw the trail of blood and the sword through the president. So Sephiroth became this like lingering threat, almost this like ghostly figure that was just like, again, just lingering over your head. And it's like, they're almost going to pull a swap where it's like, okay, introduce him right away, put him at the forefront. And maybe what you're saying in the second game, where is he? He's the lingering threat.
Also, I just had a thought right now. I wonder, for the people who played this, who've never played the original Final Fantasy VII and know nothing about any of that stuff, this is probably really good for them. That's probably why they chose to do it this way, because for all the new people, you introduce this Sephiroth guy who everyone, well, Cloud obviously has a history with, and then you see that Tifa also has a history with him.
Yes.
That she brings up in that flashback, and that's it. And you're like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And then we won't see him until we see the Nibelheim incident, and we're like, oh, that's why he's...
Okay. Yeah, it's all coming together.
I mean, I'm sure, it's weird because you can't really account for a lot of things, because Sephiroth is like one of those characters that, pierce the zeitgeist and is like I feel like if you don't know Final Fantasy, you probably know the guy with the long gray hair and the giant sword, they probably have seen him, kind of like Cloud. I feel like
he's
people
a pop
know,
culture icon. Let's be honest.
Right. I feel like when people think of Final Fantasy, they probably think of Cloud or Sephiroth. Maybe they think of Waka. I think of Waka. Whenever I hear the words Final Fantasy, I automatically think of Waka.
All right. I want to give you your piece because we got a little less than 15 minutes left here. Mm-hmm. So you're a big music guy. So I want to give you an adequate amount of time to reflect on the soundtrack. Because if we're going to talk about, did FF7 live up to the hype? The soundtrack is part of it. That original soundtrack is huge. How does the remake soundtrack live up?
I think it's great. I don't really think that there's really... I feel like they kind of went overboard, which I would have preferred them to go overboard than underboard. That there's literally, aside from remaking classic songs from there, they make some new ones, and some songs they remix up to a crazy extent where you don't even recognize that they're the same song anymore. But for all the new arrangements and stuff are great. They have a piece of music for literally every single moment in this game, which is kind of crazy.
Real.
Which is, you don't really see that, but again, this is they're pulling out all the stops. This is Final Fantasy VII. They're gonna go, especially considering that we've been hearing remixes to Final Fantasy VII music for, as long as
23 years.
Yeah, and we've heard Distant Worlds, we've heard, all these other, remixes of stuff. So it's interesting that they can still, have a new game come out and it still sounds fresh. And like I said, when we did our episode on it, there's really, I struggle to think of a song that didn't, or a piece of music that I was like, oh, this really is taking me out of it right now or something. It's everything always felt like it was, oh, this makes sense that this is playing here, or like I said, all the new stuff that they do, like, oh yeah, like Rufus, when you fight Rufus and they incorporating the Shinra theme and the Turks theme, and it's like, it just like, oh, of course it would be, and the 20,000 different versions of the battle theme are all great and, good in their own way. And, I think they knocked it out of the park, honestly.
I'd have to agree with you because it's 9 hours of pure bliss. I think the full soundtrack amounts to 9 hours. And that's just the first one. How long is the series soundtrack going to be?
I was going to say the official soundtrack doesn't actually have every track that's in the game in there, which was a little disappointing in some instances, but overall, if anyone out there who listens to soundtracks, it's a pain that you're very familiar with.
Yeah.
Because as being like a kid or something and be like, oh, I hear like a song in like a movie soundtrack or something, and I go buy the soundtrack and like, oh, that one song that I wanted isn't in there, But I think that's another aspect that I feel like I was, when we did like one of our first episodes of the Midgar Minute, that was one of the things I was not worried about was the music, because I'm like, no matter, even if they make a bad game in the past, and they've done this, Final Fantasy 13, the music is good. Hot take. You can like Final Fantasy 13. That's fine. I literally, I think I've told this to you before, but I'll tell to the audience here. When I asked a friend of mine if I should get Final Fantasy 13, he's like, yeah, it really gets good after the 60-hour mark. I'm like,
I mean, that's the thing. Let it be known, he's right.
He's correct.
But 60 hours is 60 hours.
Imagine, like, that's the thing. Like, if someone's interested about buying a product or something, it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't get good until you have used it for
until
like 3
you've
months.
Spent 2.5 days of your life.
Yeah. Or it's like you watching. I mean, it's kind of like a TV show almost, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't get good until the 3rd season, but you shouldn't
You
skip
have
over
nothing
the
better to
first 2
do,
parts.
right?
It's like, you don't, if you're gonna watch JoJo, don't skip parts 1 and 2. That's a hot take. That's a hot take right there. But you totally could. It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I think they nailed it. I hope Uematsu-san, I hope he does more great work for us. I feel like he's getting up there in age.
Let's find out. Nobuo Uematsu is...
Although I wonder...
Let's check it out. He was born in 1959. That would make him 61. Did I say that? Yep, I got that right.
He's getting up there. So
yeah, these Japanese motherfuckers don't die.
They don't. They really don't.
He's gonna outlive Justin Bieber.
I think push comes to shove. By the time he gets to that point, I'm sure Japan will have some way to preserve his mind or something. Put it in a jar somewhere, and then they get some impulses, and then he's like, oh, and then he can send some notes. He can like tap into Uematsu's brain and make One Winged Angel 2.
Just it's One Winged Angel, but in reverse.
Yeah.
All right.
Two-Winged Angel. The sequel.
Oh god.
Oh man.
All right, so we're getting close, but I want to wrap this up by, overall give your final take on Final Fantasy VII Remake. I want a closing statement that includes a summary of your take on 7 Remake, why you love Final Fantasy VII so much, and what you're looking forward to most in Part 2. If you need me to repeat that at any point, I got you.
Okay, all right, and if I go off the rails, let me know.
Yeah, I'll steer you back in. Because
I do that. If you couldn't tell. So yeah, I mean, my impressions on the remake, I loved it. I loved every second of it. There's, aside from maybe a few points where there's some like retreading and stuff that they do that not the most fun, but I feel like even then I still had fun playing the game. There was never a point in the game where I was like, oh god, I can't wait, or like, oh, I can't wait to get past this or whatever. I was always having a good time. And I think really that kind of ties back into why I like the original so much, is that I always had a blast playing that game. I mean, when I first played it back in the day, I didn't finish it because I was like 7 years old, and I was like, I don't understand all this crazy materia and whatever, and I was just, but I played the bombing run mission a bunch of times, and I think I had made it probably up to Com around there, maybe on my own, and then, I was like, I'll play it later, whatever, and then, years go by. But the original game is like, it's iconic, right? It's something that is just, I'll never forget the first time that I saw it. Saw the glow of the Mako, right? And just like the aesthetic of the world just immediately clicked with me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is something I can get down with. Yeah, and the original is something that even like I said, to this day, I can go back to, and it's like going back home. It's like something. You hear those old sounds, and you see the old everyone with their mouths open, walking around the slums, and it's like, oh yeah, this is home. What I really want What I really want for the second part is for it to come out soon. That's what I really want. And also for them to not drop the ball with the amazing setup. And, you know, obviously people have had, you know, the ending of Remake has been very, not super divisive, but there have been people that have had their doubts. And they're definitely well placed. I think that's something that you should be scared about. But I think
that's part of the fun.
Right. And I think that's something
deliberately part of the fun.
It's something that's part of the fun, and I feel like that they knew obviously that this was going to stir the pot, and I love when people stir the pot, because if this was a by the numbers remake, it would have been fine, but also kind of boring as well, because it's like, oh, I know what's happening, you know. But now that they've changed things up a bit, I'm excited, and it's something that like I might not have necessarily been as excited for Remake Part 2 if it was exactly the same, you know, and if they still broke it up the same way. It's like, here's Midgar exactly how it was, and then there's going to be the rest of the game exactly how it was. It's like, you know, I think I am incredibly hopeful, and I cannot wait, and hopefully we'll hear something soon about it, but
I hope so.
Probably not for another year or so.
I'll
probably hear about it like 6 months maybe.
I'd agree with you. What I really want is for it to come soon. Not for it to be rushed, but for it to come soon. I think in a world where everything's being remade, in a world where everything's being rehashed, redone, fresh coats of paint, I think it's refreshing that somebody stood up and said, we'll give you most of what you want, but
with a little more.
We're gonna make it something else at the same time. I think it's bold. I want to see more of it, because while we want to see our old stories retold, we also at the same time want new stories to be told. And I think go ahead.
I was gonna say, just within a different context, you know, because a lot has changed since you know, in the world since the original one, and I feel like there's new stories to tell within, you know, this world, and hopefully they take that. It seems like they are taking that opportunity to
flesh it out.
Yes, to capitalize on it. That's what I was trying to look for. I was like, But
I think it's worth mentioning, you know, if you read up on the history of the development of the original, like a lot of their ideas got compromised. You know, Yuffie and Vincent were not supposed to be optional. Like, they're supposed to be pillars of the story, but they didn't get to flesh those out the way they wanted to. And I think this time around, everything that had to be compromised has now been put back on the table. And I think that's the most exciting thing.
Yeah, that they're taking all of the compilation stuff, at least that, I mean, from stuff that's obscure as like the books, like the
kids are all right.
And it's like, you know, they're taking all this stuff and sort of recontextualizing it into this one narrative. That part is exciting to me too, because it's going to be interesting how they're going to incorporate certain parts of all this extra stuff that they've done since the original game and sort of incorporating it into this new fabric of you know, the remake is very exciting. That's what I'm most excited about, because there's so much of that compilation stuff that is like, kind of like, is it canon? Is it not? Is it who? Is it what? Who? Is it a mobile game from a flip phone game? Like, you know, like, are we like, you know, it's the stuff that I would love to see it more contextualized within its own narrative, instead of just being like, it's this weird thing over here, don't worry about it, you know.
I agree with you. Putting all of this detail under one umbrella certainly is something to be excited for. But we do need to wrap it up here. My man, thank you so much for coming on. Reminder to everybody, if you enjoyed this conversation, which I assume you did if you made it this far, otherwise, otherwise you're a sadist. Or masochist, rather. Excuse me. SAT words. They give me a little trouble. Anyway. Thank you for listening. If you want to listen to the Midgar Minute so you can get more conversations like this, you could find us on Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, Anchor, all your favorite platforms. We're there. Check us out. Again, that's the Midgar Minute. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. Very easy to find, the Midgar Minute. But again, big shout out to the Sages of the Lodge and the Mosey Gang. Thank you all for your support, and we're going to catch you on the next one. Peace out.
Peace.